Episode 22 begins at the Avalon residence. In the hallway, we see Aiden put on his apron and he rushed to the dining room. The first thing he did was to apologize, but as he already can see, his children are already fixing breakfast for him, and themselves, of course. Aiden couldn't believe it. He was in shock. So, I guess it's their turn to fix breakfast for a change, especially for their father. So when Aiden pleaded his case to say, I thought it was my turn to make breakfast. Well, it was our turn for a change, Tori said. Since we've eaten already, we figured why not make breakfast for you? So Aiden says, oh, why thank you. So once Aiden sat at the table thanks to Sakura, and that's when she made her case to say, since you're working hard at that university where you're teaching at, Tori and I had decided to help out around the house a little bit. And don't you worry about a thing, Tori explains, because in my case, Sakura and I were here for you no matter what. Well, that was very kind of you, Aiden said. So long story short, after Aiden had finished his breakfast, Sakura says, here's your lunch. By lunch, Aiden said, well, Tori and I had made it for you, Sakura said. And in my case, I think you'll like it, Sakura says. Gee, thanks a lot, Aiden said. Dane says, don't worry, I'm only going to be gone for another week, I promise. Don't worry about it, Sakura said. Then Tori asked a question, shouldn't you be heading off? Then Aiden looked at his watch and says, oh my goodness, I gotta get going. See you later, Sakura said, and their father heads off to the university where he teaches at. You can tell that Sakura was very pleased with herself. She's finished cleaning up, making her and Tori's lunch in record time. As for Tori, he lets his sister know that he's got practice and he's planning on picking up his best friend Julian on the way. So Sakura suggested that she should go along with her brother, and so that's what she did. So meanwhile at Sakura's school, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when Sakura and her best friend Madison stopped by at the bookstore. So Sakura told her best friend Madison the good news that since both her and her brother have been helping out their father, and what's even better is that his research paper will be due on Monday, but it won't be finished within a week, which is also the good news. So Madison, after hearing the good news, told Sakura, I couldn't believe that you and your brother are getting along a lot better. I agree, we did, Sakura said. Then Madison had told Sakura some even better news. She said that with those design books, she can design more costumes that way. And she said that she just couldn't wait to show them to Sakura. Well, Sakura, although optimistic, says, well, neither could I. So just when Sakura and Madison were lining up at the cashier, that's when moments later they saw Julian, who's Sakura's brother's best friend, walking in. Now you're probably wondering what was Julian doing in the bookstore? Well, he needed to pick up a book that belongs to both Tori and Sakura's father. So they both left the bookstore, both Sakura and Julian. Oh, I forgot to tell you that Sakura's best friend Madison was with them. So Sakura wants to know from Julian, is it true that my brother sent you to pick up a book for our father? Julian not only said that it's indeed true, but Julian also said that the reason why he's picking up the book for both Tori and Sakura's father is because, well, since Tori's running late with that practice that he had, so we figured why not do a favor for both Sakura's brother and, of course, his best friend. Then Sakura suspected that the reason why Julian's picking up the book for her father is because she had a thought that Ada must have wanted it for his research that day. So Julian says, well, that's correct. That's why I'm doing this favor for your brother. So what Sakura did is that she thanked Julian for doing this favor. And Julian says, well, no problem. It's the least I could do. Then Julian made a compliment to Sakura that since both her and her brother have been helping their father out a lot, and said that that was mighty kind of them to do that. Well, thanks a lot for the compliment, Sakura said. So later that night at the Avalon residence, that's Aiden downstairs in his study room, which is also the basement where there's a row of books everywhere. And that's when Sakura looked in and looks at her father and then had this thought of, I wonder if her father and also Tori's father is not going to be so tired all of a sudden later. So by the time that Sakura sees her brother, that's when Sakura closes the door of his study room, meaning the basement to be exact. So when Sakura went to see her brother in the dining room kitchen, that's when Tori asked her, has she finished laundry yet? As a matter of fact, I just did, Sakura said. Well, there's just one more thing left to do, Tori said. Here's some snacks for our father, Tori says, in case he gets hungry later. Thanks, Sakura said. So Sakura went ahead and brought some snacks for both her and Tori's father, Aiden, who's studying in the study room, of course. By the way, Tori says, don't be too long because our dad still has a lot of work to do. You gotta go upstairs to bed after that. Okay, Sakura said, and so she heads off. So back at Aiden's study room, that's when Aiden was told by Sakura there's some snacks for him. And he says, oh, as a matter of fact, I'm just about to eat them right now since it's time for my break. So Aiden agreed and had some snacks that Sakura and Tori had made for him earlier. So how's the work coming along? Sakura asked. It's coming along fine, Aiden said. But don't worry. Once I stay at the university for a couple of nights, then I promise you that all the work I did would be done. Do you think that you and your brother can handle without me for a couple more days? That's what Aiden's asking Sakura. So Sakura assures her father, and of course Tori's father as well, that he's not grumpy at all. I think you're doing fine, Sakura said. So as curious as she can be, Sakura wants to know from both her and Tori's father would it be important people to attend these seminars in a way. Well, that's a good question, Aiden says, because there are a lot of important people that go there. Of course, most of the time, some important people are interested in ancient history. There's so much to learn about in this world, Aiden explains. However, most of the people can appreciate our past in a way. So you see, Sakura, Aiden says, there's a lot of places that are yet to be discovered in a way. And that's why most of the places haven't been discovered yet had to be studied. You see, learning about our past is very important. That way, we can learn something new and it'll be passed on for future generations to explore. So you see, that's why I teach these things to the students, Aiden explains. By the way, thanks for the snacks. And don't you think it's about time you head off to bed? You're right, Sakura says. Thanks a lot. And so she heads upstairs to her room, leaving her and Tori's father all by himself in the study room. So meanwhile, upstairs in Sakura's room, that's when Sakura told Kiro that she has to go to the university where her and Tori's father have been teaching at. So that means Kiro wants to come along, so she asked him. Really? Kiro asked. So after Kiro had pleaded his case to say he doesn't want to study there, he's already intelligent as it is. But when Sakura suggested that both Tori and Aiden's father should be eating there later, she figured, well, she should have her best friend Madison going along as well. So Kiro, although curious, wants to know from Sakura, are there any cookies there? Really, Kiro, Sakura says, is food is all you ever think about? I got an idea, Kiro says. Why don't we all bring some cookies for your father? So long story short, the very next morning at the Redington University, now remember that's the same place where Tori and Sakura's father was working at and teaching at. There's Sakura along with her best friend Madison. Since it's their first trip there, they figured why not give themselves a tour around the place. So that's what they did. So anyway, Sakura and Madison were looking for the anthropology apartment. That's where her father works. And let's not forget Tori's father as well. So they were looking everywhere for it, and I guess they'd gotten a little lost. The first thing Sakura did was to thank her best friend for tagging along. No problem, Madison says. I've always wanted to visit the university. It's a great place, and she's not kidding. So after Madison said that even better, thanks to those books that she got from the bookstore earlier, she could make some new costumes. Then one of Professor Avalon's students says, "Excuse me, you two, but are you lost? As a matter of fact, we're looking for the anthropology class." "Really?" she said. And then the other student says, "Aren't you a little young for his class?" "As a matter of fact, I'm Sakura Avalon," Sakura said when she introduced herself. And then, of course, the female student says, "Really? You're Professor Avalon's daughter? Why didn't you say so? Even better, we'll take you all to Professor Avalon's class." And so Sakura appreciated it and said thank you. So Sakura and Madison, good news for them, have found the anthropology apartment thanks to the three students that took them there. And they knew Professor Avalon, meaning Sakura and Tori's father. So by the time the Sakura and Madison looked inside the window, they just couldn't believe it. They were fascinated by it. They found Professor Avalon's classroom, where he, as usual, is teaching all the students there. So, long story short, after listening to one of Sakura and Tori's father's lectures, that's when Madison made a compliment to Sakura to say how nice of a guy he is. Then, one of Aiden's students just told Sakura that one of his lectures is very well known. Then the second one just made a compliment of how good of a speaker that Sakura and Tori's father was. Then the third student had said that he thought that history class was boring until he took one of Sakura and Tori's father's classes, and that's when he was finding it very interesting. Then the female student says, "Oh, and in case you haven't noticed, where are your father's assistants? And even better, we help him with his research." "You did that?" Sakura asked. "Of course," the male student said. "We all did." Then one of the assistants says, "Oh, speaking of which, your father's lecture is almost over soon. Why don't you come with us to his office?" And so that's what Sakura and Madison did. They followed Aiden's assistants to Aiden's office. So meanwhile, at the university's office, there you see Aiden typing on his laptop when one of his assistants just lets him know that his daughter, and of course his daughter's best friends, had come to see him. So Sakura, luckily for her, she brought her basket along and said, "This is for you." "Really? That's very kind of you, Sakura. And you too, Madison," Aiden said. Now, before his assistants can head off, that's when one of them says, "If you need us, we'll be in the research room." And so they left. And Sakura says, "You have a research room? I have no idea." "Well, you see," Aiden explains, "the workers needed a place to work, but since there are no room for books anywhere, so we had to make room for them, for books and everything else." "Oh, I see," Sakura said. "Well, you see, Sakura," Aiden says, "they have helped me a lot on my research paper. I mean, true, the university can be hard at times, but with the assistants' help, we may be able to pull it off." "Of course, even better," Aiden says, "you guys can help out." But what Sakura and Madison didn't realize is that something just came out of nowhere inside Aiden's office. At first, they didn't see what it was at first. And then while Aiden continues to explain, that's when he started falling asleep in front of Sakura and Madison. But when Aiden woke up, he apologized to the girls. He says, "Oh, in case you're wondering, I haven't been getting much sleep either." So after Sakura and Madison had left the university's office, I guessing Sakura must have suspected that Aiden must be really tired somehow. And in her case, that means Kiro has been tired too. But little didn't she know, Kiro, who was in the basket, he asked a question. "What do you mean I was tired? I've been in here the whole time." "Well, if that's so," Sakura says, "why are there marks on your face?" And that's when Kiro went back to the basket. And so both of the girls laughed at that. So Sakura asked her best friend a question. Is there a way to help her father and his assistants somehow? I got an idea, Madison says. Why don't we stop by at the cafe? Good idea, Sakura says. And so that's what the two girls did. So after the girls stopped by at the cafe to get some coffee for both Sakura and Tori's father and of course his assistants, the first thing they did was to stop by Aiden's office. But they found it weird that it was empty. So Sakura thought maybe he left already. And so off the girls went. So meanwhile in the research room, well, good news for Sakura and Madison, they found Aiden's assistants and they told them the good news. They brought some coffee for them. Well, that was very kind of you, the female assistant said. But what they didn't notice is that something or someone else was in the exact same room as the girls and of course Aiden's assistants are. What they didn't realize is that this was you know what. So back with the female assistant, she told Sakura that her father is out for a while and then he'll be right back. So after the female assistant had thanked Sakura and Madison, that's when she looked over her shoulder to see two of the male assistants falling asleep, sitting up. She doesn't notice it yet, but something or someone else must have done it. Well, it's a good thing we brought some coffee when we did, Sakura said. And just when the female assistant was about to explain to find out why her two assistants were sleeping on their desks and for no reason, she too starts to fall asleep too and she fell to the floor. So after the female assistant collapsed to the floor to fall asleep, Sakura and Madison were in shock. They couldn't believe it. Kira, who later comes out of the basket, Sakura was asking him, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" "Yep," Kira says. "Make no mistake, it is definitely a you know what, a sleep card to be exact. That explains why everyone is falling asleep. And of course, Aiden, who almost fell asleep earlier back at his office." So you see, Carol explains, that's how the sleep card works. Once it sprinkles you with the sleeping dust, you fall asleep. So that explains what happens to Aiden's assistants just now, moments ago. So that's what's going to happen to us, Sakura asked. When Sakura found out about it, she says, "Oh no, then that means that my father can never get those research papers done in time unless I seal that card, and this could mean a serious problem." So Sakura knows what to do. She uses her cloud key to change it into a staff, just like she always does. Once that's all set up, so it's now up to her to catch the sleep card, but she knows she has to hurry. Well, back with Madison, she just told Kiro, "Uh-oh, I forgot to get Sakura's costume." "Well, never mind that," Kiro says. "We don't have time for that." Then out of nowhere, the sleep car's form that has the crescent shaped one that comes out of nowhere. The first thing it did was to make Madison fall asleep, with sleeping dust, of course. Once Sakura saw her best friend that just fell asleep on the floor right next to one of Aiden's assistants. That's when the sleep car's form was about to attack Sakura and make her fall asleep. But luckily for Sakura, she uses the jump to get away. And she says, "Oh no, you don't. I'm not going to go to sleep. Not just yet." So after the sleep car's form had escaped from the research room, that's when Kiro says, "Quick, it's getting away." So Kiro and Sakura went right after it. So long story short, after Sakura found out the two more assistants had fell asleep, she knew that there was no time to lose. So she went into Aiden's office, meaning her father's to be exact. So when she saw that Kira was falling asleep, Sakura now knows what to do. She uses the waiting card to catch the sleep cards forming, which she did. So now it's up to her to catch it. And so she did. So the sleep cards becomes number 22 on the list. So for Sakura, there's some good news and some bad news. First, the good news. She caught the sleep card. So now that everyone has fallen asleep earlier can now wake up. Now here comes the bad news. She now saw that all of her father's work and her father's papers, and including his laptop, it was all a mess. His office was like it's been hit by a hurricane. And now poor Sakura has felt guilt-ridden about it, that everything that her father had is now ruined. It's all destroyed. Well, good news now that Kira had woken up from his sleep on the floor. He now saw that Sakura had caught the sleep card. But now she has to tell him the bad news. All of her father's work and everything else is now destroyed. It's in ruins. And she says, "Oh, poor Dad. He's going to be very upset when he finds out. I wish there was a card that could fix everything." "I agree," Carol said. "I just wish there was a solution to all of this." Then Carol says, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but there is no amount of magic that's going to fix all of this." Suddenly, Sakura just heard her father, her best friend, and his assistants walking in, and they just saw Sakura crying. So Aiden asked her, "Are you okay?" Sakura doesn't answer, and he says, "What's the matter?" "Well, I thought you were tired," Sakura said, "so I brought you some coffee so you wouldn't fall asleep." "Now it's all my fault," Sakura says. "I ruined everything that you worked so hard for. I'm ashamed of myself. And if I hadn't arrived when I did," Sakura says, "then none of this would have happened." Then Sakura and Tori's father tries to comfort her the best way he knew how. He says, "Come on, none of this is your fault. There was no way you could have known this was going to happen. Besides, I'm the one who should apologize. Besides, my only regret," Aiden explains, "is that I wish I could have spent more time with you more than I should. And now I can. So what do you say we go home and we'll have dinner together?" Aiden suggested. And so that's what they did. So later that night at the Avalon residence, it was just after dinner time that Sakura went to the upstairs room. But for some reason, she just couldn't sleep. Kira wants to know, "Are you still feeling bad for what had happened earlier?" "As a matter of fact, I do," Sakura said. "Well, he did forgive you, did he not?" Kira asked. "It's true, he did," Sakura said. "But I just couldn't help what's going on in my head." So the next morning, while Tori was downstairs making pancakes, he saw his sister Sakura. And he says, "Gee, you're up early, especially on a Sunday." So Sakura wants to know where their father went. "Well, he had a cleanup back at the office, so he has to work here today, here at home." So after Tori has finished making pancakes for Sakura, he says, "You'll never feel any better faster if you don't eat." Well, that's good advice, especially from Tori. Then Sakura and Tori just heard a crash downstairs in the basement. It's Sakura and Tori's father, Aiden. He'll be all right. So after Sakura and Tori found out what had happened, well, good news, their father's fine. So he says, "Gee, I haven't been cleaning this room up that much." So Sakura, however, being as helpful as she could be, likes to give him a hand or two. But Aiden tries to decline Sakura's assistance to say, "No, don't worry about it. It's really not necessary." But she insisted anyway. Then Sakura, however, pleaded her case to say how she wanted to help her father and that she blames herself for what had happened at the university that day and etc. "Really, it's not your fault," Aiden said. He tries to cheer her up, but Sakura, since that Saturday's events, it really dawns on her and that she was very guilt-ridden about it. "Please let me help you," Sakura said. "I don't care what it takes. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it." And that made her father very happy to have her say that. So, you know what this means. Sakura was more than happy to help out her father in any way that she possibly could. Then when Aiden knelt down in front of Sakura, he says, "Well, I have a confession to make." So in other words, he just let slip in front of Sakura to say, "Just last night I've been thinking about it. I had finished my research already. And you know why? Because all along I had it all in my head. I will, however, tell you this. If I can get my research done on time, that is, if I work really hard, but I may need an assistant to pull it off." Having said that, that made Sakura very happy. So you know what this means? That means Aiden has allowed Sakura to help him out. And then Both father and daughter hugged each other. And watching it happen was her brother Tori. So you've heard right. Sakura now has 22 cards on the list, but there's still a lot to go. And oh, as for Lee, he still has two. So that ends episode 22.